Good evening. My name is Sarah Grant, and I'm the Transportation Manager, and co-presenting with me tonight is Bryce Hammerton, City and County of Broomfield Traffic Engineer. Welcome to the Broomfield 101 Public Forum on Transportation, and today is September 4th, 2024. My presentation will provide an overview of Broomfield transportation, local and regional progress, and provide policy overview for context as the basis to build the transportation systems that support Broomfield now and into the future. Next slide. So starting with the Broomfield 2016 Transportation Plan, Broomfield Council adopted a new vision for transportation, moving beyond not just moving cars, but moving people. The work that Broomfield undertakes daily is not only to support the movement of people driving in vehicles, but also to support the movement of all modes, people of all modes and ages and abilities using the transportation system. Understanding that not all people may have the ability to drive due to age, ability, or income to access a vehicle for transportation. The vision acknowledges that by supporting and expanding access to multimodal options, Broomfielders may reduce our dependence on single-occupant vehicles, reducing our environmental impact, all while supporting economic development. Next slide. So supporting this transportation vision are 6 key goals. The first one, as mentioned previously, moving people and goods, so increasing our capacity, but not just moving cars. Increasing access to alternative modes, as well as supporting a connected system for seamless access to modes of transportation. Next slide. As well as livable streets that are accessible, safe, and efficient. Broomfield also supports regional transportation planning, recognizing our connectedness to our neighbors around us in the Denver region. And finally, land use and transportation, and integrating the multimodal transportation system to support and complement Broomfield's economic development plans and policies. Next slide. This data was collected as a part of our 2016 transportation plan, and there are on average about 1.8 cars per Broomfield household that drives about 22,000 miles per year with an average commute of 26 minutes. In 2022, the VMT has gone down to just about 18,000 vehicle miles traveled per household. So this is indicative of the trend after COVID in 2020 during the DRCOG. Regional VMT is up from 2020, but areas have not quite returned to the 2019 levels of driving. Annually, on average, Broomfield households spend about $14,000 a year on transportation costs, and this trend is up from the 2016 plan and continues to decline based on economic factors. Combine that with housing costs, the average household spends about 54% of their income on basic costs of housing and transportation, and according to the Center for Neighborhood Technology, that should be under 45% to remain affordable. And access to affordable transportation options is a key factor to the attainment of affordable living. Next slide. This is some other data that was also included in our plan back in 2016 around our commute patterns and Broomfield residents and their destinations to work. So about 86% of our employed residents leave work to work in other communities, primarily Denver and Boulder, and about 14% of our employed residents also work here. We'll be looking to update these numbers with the upcoming transportation plan to see how these trends have changed since COVID. It's anticipated that employment may stay the same, but maybe commute patterns may be different. People who work in Broomfield and where they come from, this slide indicates where the employees that work here in Broomfield, about 88% of them commute into Broomfield every day, and only about 12% of our employment is a Broomfield resident. These regions are more scattered. About 10% come from Westminster, 10% from Denver, 8% from Thornton, and so on. And so this is indicative of how important our regional connections are in Broomfield, as indicated by our Broomfield goals and policies. So next slide. With that introduction, I just wanted to highlight some of the work that we do in Broomfield Transportation in the area of transportation planning. We review development plans to ensure there's adequate multimodal and ADA access requirements are met, as well as considerations for regional connectivity plans. Our team also assists with code updates related to transportation, such as the recent Parking and Bicycle Code update, to support and encourage all modes of transportation. Broomfield also conducts local transportation plan activities, such as the PED Bike Assessment, conducted in 2019, and the Midway Boulevard Study, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And currently, we have a transit study, and we're also supporting traffic safety study that Bryce will talk about later in this presentation. Broomfield also coordinates with our regional partners on corridors and plans, such as working with CDOT and state highways. I'm sorry, I think we missed to the next slide. Thank you. Apologies. So those corridors include 120th Avenue, Colorado 7, US 287, Colorado 128, Colorado 121. There are a lot of state highways that run through Broomfield. We work with RTD to also keep up with RTD activities and advocate for Broomfield residents' needs. We also work with DRCOG to ensure our regional priorities are included in regional plans and to compete for federal dollars. We also assist with capital project development and prioritization, as well as secure outside funding for transportation. Over the last several years, we've secured tens of millions of dollars to support transportation improvements around Broomfield. We also support regional efforts such as Bike to Work Day and have developed local programs such as the Flex Ride Zero Fare Summer Campaign that extends beyond the RTD campaign for Zero Fare. Next slide. With that as a backdrop, US 36 is a key multimodal corridor that Broomfield has been working on for more than 20 years. We've been working on that vision. We began our journey working with our neighbors along US 36 to achieve this, called the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners. And the mayor of Broomfield has been meeting monthly and going to Washington, D.C. to lobby for funds every year for 20 years. The outcome of these studies support managed lanes, bus rapid transit, a regional bikeway, and transportation demand management programs. And the infrastructure was largely complete in 2016. This group continues to meet for US 36 as well as other regional priorities. While we were studying the US 36 corridor, voters approved fast tracks in 2004, which included the US 36 BRT and Northwest Rail. The BRT launched in 2016, and in 2019, the service carried over 3.3 million passengers on the bus rapid transit known as the Flatiron Flyer, far exceeding RTD's expectations. On Bike to Work Day, we saw over 1,200 cyclists along the bikeway. Service was significantly reduced due to dramatic decline in ridership in COVID. So pre-COVID, we saw about 13,000 commuters every day riding on the Flatiron Flyer, and today service levels from RTD are approximately 33% of the trips compared to pre-pandemic. Ridership is a corresponding level. As RTD increases capacity with workforce to bring back service in areas where there's higher demand, most recently, RTD has restored a few Flatiron Flyer 2 express trips, which has provided much relief to commuters boarding in Broomfield, as the buses were quite full by the time it reached our stations. An additional round trip to Anschutz Medical Campus has been added, and communities continue to advocate for restored services as workforce capabilities allow with RTD. Broomfield and our regional US 36 neighbors continue to advocate for this service. Next slide. Moving on to Northwest Rail, the other fast tracks commitment that voters approved. The corridor was originally envisioned in 41 miles with 6 stations. One station was identified in Broomfield, and that was Flatiron Station. A secondary station at US 36 in Broomfield has since been added to that list. It requires double tracking and sharing of the BNSF Burlington Northern Santa Fe operations, and it was envisioned to be 55 trains a day. Currently, RTD does not have the fiscal capacity to complete this ultimate Northwest Rail project, but the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners have been advocating for strategies to phase in implementation of rail, including perhaps a lower cost peak service as identified in the RTD Northwest Area Mobility Study. The intent is to provide a startup service with minimal infrastructure to get service going. And the initial proposed operations is 3 trains in the morning and 3 trains in the afternoon, and that line would be shared with freight services as well as a maintenance facility in Longmont for those commuter rail cars. RTD is currently wrapping up a 2-year study along with community feedback from virtual and in-person options. Broomfield co-hosted an open house during the study, which well over 100 attended the event over here at the Broomfield Community Center. The study is evaluating the possibility of peak service rail and will be presenting the final report to RTD either in late September or early October. The date is yet to be identified. On the next slide is the goals of this study. The goals were to provide an updated engineering plan sets and cost estimates to determine the peak service recommendations and to determine the requirements to implement peak service operations as well as capital costs, operations, and estimated maintenance costs. The idea was that this project will not preclude the future build-out for the full build-out of Northwest Rail or Front Range Passenger Rail, coordinate with BNSF, and explore partnerships. Engagement is available online. You can review those studies at rtd-denver.com and search for Northwest Rail Peak Service Study, and information is available on that website. Next slide. And a few other rail updates include DRCOG and RTD have included in the Northwest Rail Regional Transportation Plan the future build-out of these facilities, which is a win that has not been included in plans before. In parallel project, the Front Range Passenger Rail Alternatives Analysis identified the Northwest Rail alignment as a promising ridership potential. And the Front Range Passenger Rail would be known as intercity rail, which is covering longer distances with fewer stops and faster speeds. So the idea is to look at possibility of these two services possibly running on the same alignment. In 2021, the two pieces of legislation passed, both supported by Broomfield Council, that allowed for the creation of the Front Range Passenger Rail District and to allocate funds for Front Range Passenger Rail to continue to the next level of study. In 2023, the Front Range Passenger Rail submitted to the Federal Corridor Identification Program, which is funded by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and they received additional funding to continue studying. An important distinction that the Front Range Passenger Rail is intercity rail versus a commuter rail, which is Northwest Rail. And more information is available online at ridethefrontrange.com. Next slide. As mentioned previously, regional coordination is one of the transportation goals, and the Northwest Area Mobility Study identified many corridors to improve transportation options. And these corridors in Broomfield include Colorado 7, 120th Avenue, and US 287. Next slide. So first we'll discuss Colorado 7, which is a high priority for Broomfield, but also a priority of many of our neighbors along this 25-mile corridor between Brighton and Boulder. It includes 8 communities, including 3 counties, well, technically 4 counties, excuse me. Broomfield helped establish the Colorado 7 Coalition in 2014 and expanding the scope of the Northwest Area Mobility Vision to extend from I-25 all the way to Brighton. Broomfield has helped secure over $20 million in funds to be used across the corridor, including initiating preliminary design plans for the ultimate build-out in the Broomfield sections. There are also some interim improvements that are in design right now, including a shoulder expansion at the Coal Creek Culvert just east of Broomfield that will improve safety for people traveling in cars, as well as the safety for bicyclists along that section east of Broomfield. Broomfield also supported CDOT's federal grant application to design a side path connecting Lafayette to I-25, and we're awaiting that funding award potential. And CDOT has established a site for information about the project and also encourages any questions that the community may have or any comments around Colorado 7. And that's at cdot.gov/projects/studies/Colorado Brighton. You may also Google it at CDOT Colorado 7 Brighton to Boulder, and that should be the first thing to pop up. Some quick stats, next slide, about this corridor. We do expect over 49,000 new residents, over 38,000 new jobs along this 25-mile corridor between Brighton and Boulder, and an average of 37% increase in traffic, with most of that traffic increasing on the eastern end of up to 50 to 60% over today's traffic numbers. Some of the analysis that we've done to improve multimodal options found that with bus rapid transit, about 8,000 to 10,000 boardings per day could be seen on this in 2050 with building out multimodal options. Next slide. Additionally, there is a mobility hub planned at Colorado 7 and I-25, which is considered a separate but integrated project and is estimated at over $250 million, which also includes the I-25 managed lanes component to include all of that section that is currently not complete today. But in the meantime, CDOT and local agencies have secured $16 million for an interim project, and construction will begin in early next year, concluding in 2026, for an interim mobility hub to increase transit options at the I-25 and Colorado 7 interchange. It'll include transit stops, a park and ride, as well as a pedestrian and bicycle bridge connecting the 2 stations. Additionally, corridor partners have applied for and secured $9 million in Colorado 7 starter service, which will be anticipated to begin in 2026, timing with the opening of this new facility. So this will be a key connection on I-25 and Colorado 7, connecting those transit services and connecting the communities in Broomfield. Currently, transit service does not exist on I-25 between Broomfield and 120th Avenue, I-25 and 120th Avenue, Wagon Road Park and Ride. Next slide. Additionally, 120th Avenue, another CDOT roadway, and I mentioned previously, is another priority that we have heard from the community, as well as that was identified in the Northwest Area Mobility Study. So we've done quite a lot of work on this corridor. We recently completed a safety study with CDOT, and we also submitted a grant request to Dr. Cog as a sponsor to initiate the design of the section between Nickel and Upham to include sidewalks and bike lanes and improve all circulation between the neighborhoods and the businesses. Most currently, 120th Avenue sidewalk and infill access project will actually be under construction starting next week. Broomfield received a grant from CDOT, $2 million to improve pedestrian and sidewalk infill gaps, as well as access ramps and transit access improvements on this section of highway. Please be patient and be safe in these construction zones that are anticipated to begin next week between Quay and Vrain, as well as the Chase frontage zone. Next slide. So now that we've talked a lot about regional transportation planning, connectivity, and projects, I wanted to highlight some of the work on our local roadways. Next slide. After completion of the new transportation plan at the end of 2016, Broomfield initiated a PED bike assessment to understand priorities and develop a pipeline of projects to support multimodal transportation. We've worked to identify deficiency, missing links, gather public input, and develop a network and a list of capital projects. Next slide. Some of the things that we heard from the community, we were actually able to leverage the Broomfield Voice. This was a very early implementation of using that page back in 2018, and we received over 460 comments online, survey responses, and map-related comments. So very robust community engagement. In terms of what we heard that folks wanted to have more low-traffic routes for walking and bicycling, regional and local connectivity, more trails, sidewalks, bike lanes, better crossings, amenities such as bike parking, water refill stations, and access to and from US 36 Bikeway and bus rapid transit stations, the Broomfield Community Centers here, and County Commons. Some of the key roadways that we also heard was Industrial Lane, Midway Boulevard, Dillon Road, Sheridan Parkway, Nickel, Commerce, and 120th Avenue, as well as a connection between Midway and Industrial Lane at Hoyt Street. And Broomfield's happy to report that 2016, that many of the top corridors identified from public engagement have either been completed, are in design, or actively working on plans for improvement in coordination with open space and trails and transportation to make key connections in our community. I'll buzz through some of the major accomplishments by our capital projects teams in the next few slides. And Broomfield has worked to expedite many of these projects by securing grant funding as much as possible to stretch local taxpayer dollars. Next slide. And so again, since the completion of the transportation plan, here are some of the highlights of projects. Dillon Road, so it's so much more than bike lanes and sidewalks. It was also a massive utility project and stormwater project. And Lowell Boulevard between 120th Avenue and 136, complete streets, including a side path facility and bike lanes and landscaping improvements. Next slide. We also heard from the community that first and final mile connections to US 36 Bikeway and US 36 transit stations was one of the key themes, and we've done a lot of work in this area, and we started these efforts before the assessment. So this list is certainly not exhaustive. The bridge connecting between Midway and Industrial and Hoyt, now known as Shep's Crossing, is now complete. We completed several underpasses, such as the Northwest Parkway Underpass and the Storage Tech Underpass. We've completed a realignment of the US 36 Bikeway where it was substandard, as well as creating new connections to the US 36 Bikeway. Some other connections include Nickel Street bike lanes and Industrial Lane Phase 1, which was completed in 2022. And we have Industrial Lane Phase 2 that will be going into construction early next year. We've also completed 4 bike and ride secure shelters as well to support safer bike parking at the stations for those that would like to leave their bicycle at the station. Next slide. As mentioned previously, this is the US 36 Bikeway. This is a regional connection recognized by Dr. Cog as a regional active transportation corridor. And we've worked with grant funding to meet the US 36 standard of 12-foot widths and appropriate grades to increase safety in this section near the Flatiron Crossing development. Next slide. Other projects include improving safety at Legacy High School on 136 Avenue, including wider side paths, queue lanes, and bike lanes. Nickel Street was also a route that didn't have bike lanes. It is now a key route accessing the neighborhood to and from US 36. Next slide. Complete street elements in conjunction with other projects where ped bike may not be the main focus of the project, but we work to look at all the projects that we do and combine efforts to reduce disruption to the neighborhood and circulation while bringing benefits to the community. Highlighted here is the 2021 North Area Force Main project, where some of it ran along Zuni between 136 and Midway. Broomfield was able to complete a wider side path to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles, as there's no room to add a bike lane on that road. And that project was done simultaneously to reduce disruptions. Additionally, in 2018, Broomfield completed intersection improvements at Sheridan and Lowell, but also included 800-foot stretch of missing sidewalk connecting Northwest Parkway to the intersection. So we try to be comprehensive when we approach these projects. Next slide. In addition, so some of these other projects that we try to combine, this was an example of US 287 at Blue Star Park, where we were able to complete a high-priority sidewalk missing gap along a state highway while we were replacing a culvert. And so we were able to accomplish two objectives at the same time. Next slide. As mentioned previously, here's Industrial Lane Bikeway Phase 1, providing a key connection between the Nickel-Commerce Street intersection to Sept Crossing, as well as the US 36 bikeway connection. And Phase 2 is in design and funded for construction with a grant, and that'll be underway early next year. And that will connect all the way from the existing end of the trail to US 36 and Flatiron Station. Next slide. And supporting bikes can be more than just bike lanes and paths. Broomfield has invested in, along with some grants, in 2 recreational bike parks to support youth developing skills. McKay Bike Park is located on Zuni, and it provides dirt jumps and a progression of opportunities to learn new skills. And Anthem Community Pump Track is an asphalt track designed for a range of abilities and ages for bikes, scooters, inline skaters, as well as skateboarders. Next slide. And so what's next? Just to recap, as mentioned previously, 120th Avenue side path infill will see construction starting next week, and Industrial Lane Phase 2 will be underway next year. And some highlights that are coming up for construction soon next year include 112th Avenue, near the Jefferson Academy and the BNSF Railroad crossing, where we'll be making some improvements to build that out to the ultimate roadway section with bike facilities and sidewalks across the BNSF Railroad, as well as the Industrial Lane Nickel and Commerce intersection. This will provide a new traffic signal, improve circulation for vehicles, but also increase access for people walking and biking, trying to access the US 36 multimodal facilities. And in design now, one more will be 3rd Avenue between Nickel and Emerald, where that will be kind of a dual project. We'll be doing stormwater improvements, and while we're doing that, also adding sidewalk facilities. In design now, there is a plan for Airport Creek Trail Underpass under the BNSF Railroad, so that's just north of 112th Avenue, near the Jefferson Academy, creating new connections and reducing barriers. Next slide. And I'll just touch on this really quickly. Another massive undertaking that Broomfield has completed in 2021 is completing quiet zones along all of our railroads in Broomfield, so providing safety benefits, as well as with these benefits, with these safety benefits, the trains are not required to use their horn at each crossing. We're now working on completing the elements to enhance the pedestrian and bicycle access and safety across all of these locations, as noted on the previous slide. This effort began more than 10 years ago in coordination with our regional partners along the Northwest Rail Corridor, and now there are 19 miles of continuous completed quiet zones from Westminster to Boulder, and several more underway. Next slide. The pedestrian bicycle assessment also provided a toolbox of context-sensitive treatments to enhance cycling in Broomfield at intersections and conflict zones. Next slide. And using this toolbox in coordination with traffic and public works, we've improved over 29 miles of on-street bike facilities, with more on the way this fall and spring. And similarly, since the 2016 plan, we've improved over 50 crossings with stripings and infrastructures, including flashing beacons, push buttons, operational improvements, and largely this is coordinated with traffic and public works. Next slide. We also heard from the community that the Midway Boulevard was a concerning corridor for walking and bicycling, but it wasn't clear what the scope of the projects would be. So we secured some grant funding and conducted a robust effort with the community and received over 1,800 comments from the community, and many were very engaged with this project, with positive feedback on ideas on how to improve the corridor. Sorry, next slide. Perfect. Next slide. And so just to recap really quickly, again, we heard from the community with the ped bike assessment that this was a really high priority to reduce the stress of walking and bicycling. People didn't feel comfortable walking and biking on this road. And this was the third highest corridor where we received comments from the ped bike assessment at the time. And so the goals of the project were to create an environment where people felt more comfortable of all ages and abilities using this roadway, and increase compliance with posted speeds and increase safety. Next slide. So some progress on that after the completion at the end of 2022. Broomfield has secured funding to complete the design for the ultimate concept, which will begin in 2026 and run through approximately 2028. In the meantime, we've also applied for some funding to do some interim improvements, and we're awaiting that application, that status of that award at this time. Beyond 2028, we'll continue to seek funding opportunities to implement that ultimate plan. And information is still online at broomfieldvoice.com at the Midway Plan if you'd like to look at those. Next slide. One of the other themes that we heard in the assessment, ped bike assessment, was that wayfinding was really important for folks. And although the implementation does take time, Broomfield is proud to make progress on what we've heard from the community, including securing a grant to conduct a robust planning effort with the community, as well as securing budget to begin implementation. We hired a contractor this year, and fabrication is on the way, and do expect to see those out on the Lake Link Trail as the first implementation in the next couple of months. Next slide. And in addition to walking and biking, Broomfield also works to improve public transportation options with our partners. Though not shown on a slide, first and foremost, the City and County of Broomfield runs a transit service called Easy Ride for older adults over 60 and adults over 18 with a disability. The service is made available at no cost with support from Dr. Cog and the City and County of Broomfield local funds, and right now about 20,000 trips are served every year through our Broomfield Easy Ride program. Additionally, RTD provides a flex ride service, and Broomfield actually has 3 flex ride service areas, which is a curb-to-curb service available to all ages and abilities. There's no qualifications to use the service. And for many Broomfielders, this might be the only access to local transit, as fixed route service is very limited. We started up some new programs, including the Zero Fare Summer, which you may have heard about. We've done this before RTD was doing it, as a way to promote the service and let Broomfielders know that this is an option. We've also expanded new service into North Broomfield. They started this last year, as shown on the screen, north of 144th Avenue in North Broomfield. And we also added Saturday service in the original Broomfield area. And then ridership has significantly increased. We run about, with RTD, 28,000 trips a year, and this was a 26% over 2022. Next slide. We also leverage our state partners and resources to increase access to transit. And last year, our Broomfield team worked with Bustang, with the state of Colorado, to increase access along US 36 for the seasonal service between Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. And now there's a stop at US 36 and Broomfield Station. It is very affordable at $15 for a round trip service and $5 for children. It operates weekends and holidays running through the end of September. Next slide. Another effort that we are currently undertaking is a transit study. So this is happening right now. As Broomfield grows and changes, so do the mobility needs of our residents. And the purpose of our Broomfield Transit Study is to help identify ways to improve transit access for all ages, abilities, and incomes. Input will be gathered in 2 phases: at the beginning of the project to help develop recommendations, and near the end of the project to get feedback on the draft recommendations. The Phase 1 engagement began this summer, beginning at Brouhaha, employing a variety of methods through which community members can provide input, including a transit survey to the community, a focused flex ride survey, as well as a statistically valid survey, engagement at popular events and pop-ups, as well as engaged focus groups. The Broomfield Transportation Forum plans to have a presentation on this next month in October. Phase 2 is planned for spring and summer of 2025, and during the phase, the project team will share how public engagement has shaped the plan, and committee members will have an opportunity to provide input on the draft recommendations. To follow along about the project and learn more, please visit broomfieldvoice.com/transit study, or or you may use the QR code up there on the screen. Broomfield also supports programmatic efforts, including supporting our partners internally and externally to support a culture of bicycling and active modes transportation, including the Dr. Cog Way to Go Bike to Work Day station at Interlock and East Park, and supporting Broomfield Summer Concert Series by providing bike valet parking and to encourage residents nearby to walk and bike and reduce parking impacts to the neighborhood. Next slide. And finally, I'd like to invite the community to stay engaged with us as we have a new email for questions about bicycling, and we also have our transportation email, so bikes@broomfield.org and also transportation@broomfield.org. Please stay engaged at the Broomfield Voice for all projects City and County of Broomfield is seeking input on or feedback. There's also a weekly newsletter with the Broomfield Be in the Loop, as well as monthly newsletters for various departments and topics you might be interested in. And so there's a QR code on the screen, and we invite you to stay engaged with us in the future. Thank you very much, and I will pass it off now to Bryce Hammerton, City and County of Broomfield Traffic Engineer.
All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Bryce Hammerton, Broomfield's traffic engineer, and I'll be talking about traffic engineering today. Next slide. So this presentation is just going to be a brief overview of traffic engineering. So if you do have any questions afterwards, definitely feel free to follow up. So to start, what is traffic engineering? Traffic engineering is any engineering that involves or impacts traffic on roadways to improve safety and efficiency. We review all signing and striping being placed as part of roadway plans or coordinate any signing and striping changes with other staff. We set signal timing plans for all signalized intersections, and these plans may include left turn phasing, pedestrian crossing time, or coordination. And we also organize data collection for traffic volumes, speeds, and crashes. Next slide. All developments in Broomfield require a traffic study to document the impacts to the surrounding intersections and roadways. For example, many developments have turn lanes, and it's at this time that determination is made. We review traffic control plans that are required for any construction in Broomfield. In 2022, we reviewed 308 public-private improvement permits and 50 street closure permits, most of which included traffic control plans. And the two most requested items will go into more detail in future slides, that being traffic signals and traffic mitigation. So starting with traffic signals, and there is more detail that we have on our website regarding traffic signal warrants. And also if you search, which the website's listed here, but if you search in Google Broomfield Traffic Engineering, it should be the first link that pops up for you. So traffic signals, when they're installed correctly, can increase traffic capacity and improve safety at intersections. And we currently have 90 traffic signals, and we also have about 5 roundabouts. And so traffic signal installation is based on engineering study and should be installed only if at least one of 9 traffic signal warrants are met. The warrants are listed in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD for short. So this graph is an example of one of them. It's the warrant 3, the peak hour warrant. And basically what it's showing is as traffic volume on the major street is increasing, that threshold to meet the warrant decreases. Next slide. So some recent projects and some planned projects are listed here. Recent traffic signal installations have been done at 136 in Aspen, Sheridan in Alcott, and Sheridan in 160th. And we also have some other intersection improvements that were done recently at Lowell and Middle Peak. A left turn lane was added. Sheridan and First Ave, the project included turn lanes, signal poles, and pedestrian facilities. And then at Midway and Sheridan, we improved turn lanes and bike facilities. And we have some upcoming projects, including traffic signals at Midway and Willow Run, Lowell and Broadlands, 136 and Legacy High School, and Sarah mentioned as well, Industrial Lane at Nickel. And we also have a roundabout planned at Lamar and First Ave as part of the Broomfield Town Square development. So now moving into traffic mitigation. And again, we do have more detail on this at our website. Traffic mitigation is primarily in regards to speeding concerns, which we do have a policy to address those. So to start, we receive a concern, collect data, and then evaluate that data. And then if our criteria is met, we propose a treatment and perform outreach if needed. So our minimum criteria involves volume, speeds, crashes, and outreach. The minimum volume per day is 500 vehicles. The minimum 85th percentile speed is 7 miles per hour over the speed limit. And what that 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of vehicles are driving at or below. And that speed requirement drops to 5 miles per hour when the roadway is adjacent to a school, park, or care facility. And if there are 3 correctable crashes in a given year, that criteria is automatically met. And then 2/3 of the neighborhood that are within 500 feet of the installed device need to approve the project. So we have 2 types of treatments that we can do with traffic mitigation. The first is education and enforcement. These treatments are less invasive and do not require that neighborhood support component. These treatments could be like signing and striping, police enforcement, educational flyers, or speed radar signs. And then we have engineering treatments, which do require that neighborhood support. And these might be things like speed cushions, traffic circles, or medians. And some recently completed projects that we have done for traffic mitigation include on Highland Park Drive, Perry Street, and 123rd Place. And we also have planned projects for Netta Drive, First Ave, and 138th. I also wanted to touch on a new traffic counts map that we have online. This is at our same website. This will allow you to actually click on points on a map to see what existing speed and volume data we have. And also, when you do click on those points, it will tell you if it was a previous traffic mitigation request or not. And then also wanted to touch base on the Broomfield Transportation Safety Action Plan. So what we want to do is identify projects or strategies to improve safety in Broomfield in a formalized plan. And then we can use that plan to obtain future funding to actually implement those projects and strategies. We will be looking at crash data and also collecting feedback from the community. And we would encourage everybody to participate in this engagement. We have a survey and a mapping tool available right now at our website, which is broomfieldvoice.com/BTSAP. And then this is just a note on some of the upcoming forums for Broomfield 101. And that brings us to the end, so we can take any questions at this time. Yeah, we can make it available.
So the question for those who might be listening to the recording was whether the presentation will be available. And yes, it will be available on our website. So I've got a microphone, and I know it's kind of awkward, but if you have questions, I'll have you speak them into the microphone so that we can have them in the recording. But we do have 3 that were submitted ahead of time, so I'll ask those. Let's see, the first one. I'd like to know how the city decides which traffic device to use at intersections. Specifically, why the city decided traffic lights were the best option for Aspen Street at West 142nd Avenue. It would seem a traffic circle would have made more sense and provide better flow of traffic, especially where they would be very busy at the AM and PM drive times. but mostly quiet during the rest of the day. And if that particular intersection is going to be that busy, why did the city reduce the number of left turn lanes from 2 down to 1 at the intersection of Aspen and Dillon Road?
Thank you for that question. There are a couple points that I think we can touch on. The first one being just in general, when we're looking at a traffic signal versus a roundabout, generally the first thing that we want to happen is one of those traffic signal warrants are met, that we had talked about. So that would indicate the need for a project, at which point generally we'll do like an alternatives analysis, which will take into account a number of things, like cost, feasibility, space, operations, safety, all these things. And at that point in time, we'll make the decision on the project. One of the biggest things that detract us from choosing a roundabout is the constructability and also the right-of-way space needed. Historically, roundabouts have been very large, which oftentimes, I guess, we need to acquire right-of-way to do that type of project. So yeah, that's just kind of in general the process we would take. At that particular location of Aspen and 142nd, the signal actually was not warranted as part of the traffic study that was submitted with the development, but it was decided as part of the site development plan approval that the signal would be installed. And that was a decision that council made for safety of the development. And then actually one other thing too that I wanted to touch on that, on roundabouts in specific. So historically, roundabouts have been much larger. They haven't been implemented, until fairly recently. And even in the last 2 years, there's a new roundabout guide that was released that's giving us some good guidance on smaller roundabouts that we can use in more constrained situations. So I would personally like us to look at doing more of those smaller type roundabout designs.
Thanks. And I should have said, I didn't introduce myself. Sorry about that. Anna Burtonzetti, and I'm one of the co-directors for community development and currently serving in an interim role with the city and county manager's office as a deputy. So next question. With regards to transportation safety, there seems to be a dramatic lack of traffic officers patrolling the streets. This has led to a significant number of people running stop signs, running red lights, failing to register their vehicles, etc. Allowing these minor traffic laws to go unpunished enables individuals to break other laws. Is Broomfield City and County going to increase the number of traffic safety officers?
Yeah, so our police department is definitely looking at their workload, their capacity, taking all that into account and scaling up their unit as appropriate as Broomfield develops and increases in population. So that is something that our police department is trying to do.
And I should say they do regularly.
Yes.
Annually.
Correct. Yep. Annually at budget review. Oh, yes. Thank you, Sarah. Additionally, the police department has a form online, and they also have a non-emergency dispatch number. And they always recommend to us that we tell people to don't hesitate to call that number if there's any traffic infractions, and they can put it on their list for additional enforcement.
Thanks. Yeah, that form online, I think if you search Broomfield Police Traffic, it'll pop up. And it's pretty good. It'll let you report places that you're seeing concerns. And then they'll increase patrols in response. So it's great. All right, last question that we received in advance, and then we'll go to the audience if we have time. Why must we drive on streets with center islands such as Lowell by the Durda Center? These are expensive wastes of money. If If you are on such a street and have to make a left turn, you're taking your life in your hands in many cases since you cannot see the oncoming traffic until you are into the turn. Similarly, when trying to enter such a street by making a left turn, your vision is usually blocked to the extent that you run the risk of an accident when you hit a car that was not visible when you entered the turn. Let's save the money spent on landscape maintenance each year by converting these islands into an extra traffic lane, which can help solve our traffic problems.
Thank you for that question. Strictly from a traffic perspective, there's a few reasons why medians are useful. One, depending on the situation, it can slow speeds. If you've got a tighter roadway, maybe some landscaping in the median that naturally promotes slower speeds. And then another big reason why we might have medians is access control. So along some of our major arterial roadways, like Sheridan, 144th, Dillon, we don't want access points spaced to the same extent that we do on residential streets. So a median is one way that we can restrict access at those locations to promote more through traffic. So those are two kind of thoughts around medians. And then in specific relation to site distances, if you do have a concern with site distance at any location, we definitely encourage you to reach out to us, and that's something that we can definitely look at. We work with our parks department all the time to either trim trees to the required levels or trim bushes so that they're lower to the ground. So yeah, it's definitely something that we can do.
Great, thanks. So we've got some time if anyone's got questions.
Thank you, Scott Ogle. I live up in Anthem Ranch, and I've lived in Broomfield for 11 years. I used to be able to come to city council and be a grumpy old man and complain that nobody paid any attention to us at all. Sarah, thank you. I see there's finally going to be some progress made in public transportation already that's happening up there. Things are happening. Meantime, Lowell, which we access frequently, has two significant problems. Number one, the Sheridan and Lowell intersection went from a 4-lane stop sign, which was obviously totally inadequate, to arguably 2 lanes each way. But most of the traffic makes, if it's going eastbound Sheridan to northbound Lowell, there are 2 left turn lanes. And it's one of those lockout left turn lanes where you get your time, then you can't go while the through traffic goes, of which there is none. I would like you to look at the signal timing on that and perhaps allow left turns during the generic green time. Next, I don't know if this is Broomfield or not, but Highway 7 in Lowell, again, everybody going north on Lowell makes a left turn onto 7 westbound rather than going straight through to Bonanza. The signal there has very interesting timing. All of the left turn traffic backs up if one car triggers the light to go straight. The left turn gets enough time for everybody to go. If nobody is going straight, which is frequent, it cuts off after 3 cars. I don't know who is responsible for that light.
Yeah, so thank you for that comment, and Broomfield can definitely look into that signal timing at 160th and Lowell, Sheridan and Lowell. The signal at State Highway 7 in Lowell is a CDOT signal, so we can definitely pass that message along. It sounds like it's a detection problem between the left turn lane. So yeah, thank you.
Bryce, in general, if folks have identified areas of concern, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you to ask about signal timing or having someone take a look at counts, or how could they best reach you with their concerns?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My personal email is definitely the best option for traffic-specific concerns, which is bhammerton@broomfield.org. And that email is listed on our website as well. If you are unsure if it's a traffic or transportation type issue, feel free to just message the transportation@Broomfield email, and yeah, either Sarah or I will get back to you.
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, transportation@broomfield.org, that will get to both of us, so that's easy to remember. I just wanted to follow up at Colorado 7 at Lowell. We've actually secured funding to go to 90% design to improve that intersection in coordination with Erie and with CDOT. Of those of the intersections in Broomfield, we identified that to be the first priority to advance. So once we complete that design, we'll be working for CDOT to figure out the best path forward to improve that intersection for the capacity needs, because it is very much needed.
All right, thanks. Other questions?
Bryce, thanks for the insight into roundabouts. One thing that we didn't talk about very much tonight was how expensive car infrastructure is. Can you comment on like the total cost of ownership for a traffic signal over 10 years, 20 years compared to a roundabout? And like, how would that impact the city's budget if it was 90 roundabouts and 5 traffic signals versus how it is today? Like, is there a significant difference there at all?
Yeah, I do not have exact numbers on that for you. But in general, yeah, as we try to move forward in future projects, that is going to be a consideration on, starting to do some more roundabouts where we have that space and capacity to do so. Yeah, traffic signals over time, there's ongoing maintenance, there's new technology that's involved with them that we're constantly trying to upgrade. So that definitely adds to the cost. But yeah, we're happy to, if you're looking for like actual numbers, can definitely, yeah, I'm not sure in that, but I can get you that proportion if you would like at a later time.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I also wanted to add that, as mentioned earlier, that roundabouts do take a bigger footprint than existing intersections. So retrofitting existing intersections may be challenging due to right-of-way constraints and property ownership, but definitely something to look to the future.
Let's keep it going. Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you again for coming. And could we put the last slide up that had we have 2 more of these coming up. Appreciate everyone coming out. If you have additional comments or questions afterwards, that transportation at Broomfield is a great way to reach us. And then we have 2 more 101s. They're the next 2 Wednesdays. We have the Elections Forum and Public Safety. And then also tomorrow night, we have a Utility Enterprise Funds workshop that's in this same location. All of these are in this location. And so the first hour of that, it starts at 5 o'clock, will be an opportunity to ask questions and get additional information. And then another hour of more group question and answer. And then there's a study session for continued discussion on the enterprise funds on the 17th. Still in this room, spending a lot of evenings here. Thank you again for coming, and appreciate it.
Thank you.